Welcome to Beyond the Plates, Industry Talks by Le Cordon Bleu. In this podcast, we get some real insight into the food and hospitality industry from a variety of renowned chefs, industry experts, and Le Cordon Bleu alumni. Join us as we hear the fascinating stories and unique experiences behind some of the best-known names in the industry.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Le Cordon Bleu London's guest speaker series. Today we have one of the most respected chefs in the London culinary scene, an English chef whose career has spanned over the last 4 decades in prestigious culinary and hospitality institutions of the country. We welcome Chef John Williams MBE. Son of a Tyneside fisherman and taught by his mother to cook, and continuing with cookery classes at school, his culinary career began in 1974. By qualifying as a chef, Chef Williams worked his way through to the ranks and files of London culinary scene. In 1984, Chef John accepted the position of chef director at the restaurant Le Crocodile in Kensington before joining the distinguished Savoy group of hotels and restaurants in 1986. During his impressive 18-year-old tenure with the Savoy Group, Chef John served as a premier sous chef at Claridge's and maître chef de cuisines at the Berkeley before his move to head up the Claridge's kitchen as maître chef de cuisine in 1995. In his current capacity as executive chef at the Ritz, Williams oversees a kitchen brigade of over 60 chefs and is responsible for the menus in all outlets of the hotel. The recipient of a royal warrant for banqueting and catering services from His Royal Highness the Princess of Wales, the Ritz was the first and only hotel to receive this prestigious accolade. For over a century, the Ritz London has been the benchmark by which hotels are measured. Perfectly located in a landmark position in the heart of London's West End, the Ritz is moments from the finest shopping destinations the capital has to offer. This iconic hotel has long been the hotel of choice for royalty, aristocracy, dignitaries, and countless other discerning guests. The proud holder of Pierre Taittinger International Award and the Kraft Guild of Chefs Award in 2000, Williams has also represented Great Britain in the prestigious Bocuse d'Or culinary competition and continues to mentor the English team. In 2005, Williams became the first British chef to be conferred with a CMA, the equivalent of an MBE, by the French government. In 2006, Williams was invited to the Worshipful Company of Cooks as a full liveryman, and in the same year became a member of Wine Guild of the United Kingdom. In 2008, John Williams received the ultimate accolade when he was awarded as MBE in the New Year's Honours List by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II for his services to hospitality. Later in the year, he was recognized again for his remarkable achievements and dedication to the industry at the annual Katie Awards, and was named winner of the Outstanding Contribution to the Industry Award. In 2013, Tatler awarded Williams with the Lifetime Achievement Award at the annual Restaurant Awards. Chef John's involvement is not restricted to just the gastronomy in hotels. He's very active in various charities and goes beyond into the wider television and other partnerships. I'm certainly time restricted to list the various accolades he has been conferred with. In this session, we will know more about Chef John Williams, MBE, his journey, his current role in delivering the luxury hospitality segment, and much more. Thank you, Chef, for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you, Nitin, and good afternoon to everyone. I hope everybody's keeping fit and well. Let me start with my journey. Obviously, I started in the Northeast, but very quickly came down to carry on my apprenticeship in London, where I started in the Royal Garden Hotel. I spent a total time, in actual fact, of 7 years in the Royal Garden. And every time I was actually trying to leave, my boss would give me a promotion. I actually ended up being a sous chef in the main kitchen, and I finished by running the Royal Roof Restaurant, which was their fine dining restaurant in the last part of the years there. My boss actually said to me, which was Mr. Fougere, he said, "It's time for you to leave." I said, "What? Time for me to leave?" He said, "Yes, I'm buying a restaurant and you're going to run it." So I went on a journey of working in a freestanding restaurant. the hardest work of my life, I might add. I used to go to the market twice a week, getting up at 5 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning, and basically working until 12 o'clock at night, working 6 days a week. My half day was a Saturday, starting at 12 o'clock, finishing at 12 o'clock, and I used to sleep on a Sunday. Anyway, it came to pass after about 2 years working in the restaurant. I had various contact with the executive chef in Claridge's, in Mario Leshnik, who was the executive chef there. And he had offered me a position the year before, but in the tenure, I had a chance meeting by somebody visiting my restaurant, who's a friend of mine, and his restaurateur boss said to me, "What are you doing in this restaurant? Your food is not the style for the restaurant. You know, it wasn't the greatest ambience or decor in the restaurant that we had, but it became very successful." Anyway, I decided to go along and meet Mario, and I was offered the job as premier sous chef at the age of 27. And we had a brigade of some 75, 80 chefs in Claridge's at the time. And I took the job with open arms because basically haute cuisine is what I wanted to do. And if you want to cook the finest food, you have to go where the money is, I'm afraid, and make sure that people can spend that. And Claridge's was the perfect board. And when I arrived there, rest assured, my eyes were opened. We were cooking for royalty, heads of state, captains of industry, because that's the way the Savoy Group was set up. Claridge's was organized to deliver service for those kind of people, whereas the Savoy, for example, was very much the hotel for the movie star. The Connaught was for the rich American clientele, and it was like a club. Whereas the Berkeley, which opened in 1976, that was very much for the nouveau riche. So they had a plan in what they were doing, but I was very fortunate while I was at Claridge's for the first term as premier sous chef to actually cook for state functions, presidents. I think I cooked for 7 presidents or ex-presidents in the time that I actually was there. And it was quite emotional and very nerve-wracking to make sure that everything was going the way that it should be. And it was a very busy establishment, I might add. But I had 2 children, and at the age of 31, I was already saying, you know, I've got to change and go up a gear and become head chef. And I was asked to go for an interview at the Ritz London at the time. And I was actually down to the last 2. And the thing was, it was covered in the Times newspaper. And one of the bookmakers had run, a odds of who was going to win this prestige job. And I was second favorite. But the person that got the job was David Nichols, because he had experience of being an executive chef. So that started the ball rolling, and I sent a lovely little note to the manager then, who was Terry Holmes. He had sent me a very nice letter, and I replied by saying, "Just one thing, you've made the biggest mistake of your life." Anyway, I didn't get the job at the time, and I went back into the Savoy Group. They heard that I had been down looking for the job, and they said, "What are you doing? You are actually one of our head chefs. We want you to, take the next position that comes in the Savoy Group." And I said, "However, we have to move it along a little bit because, I'm really struggling. I've got 2 children. I've moved. I've got a house. I have to pay the mortgage." And the chairman of the time of the Savoy Group was a man called Mr. Giles Shepherd, who was also a Coldstream Guards, quite a gentleman, a real nice man, and quite a gourmet. And he said to me, he said, "John, you will go." I said, "Mr. Shepherd, it has to be quick." 3 months later, I was in the Berkeley as executive head chef, and I was on my way. Believe it or not, the food I felt was not up to standard in any shape or form. In fact, I used to have a little giggle because people would say, wow, look at that. All I had done was put a leaf of parsley or something on the dish. And it was about making refinement, making sure that we delivered the food that we wanted to deliver for the customer and that suited the customer in the restaurant, and looking after the banqueting. The banqueting was quite dismal. I made it my goal to increase the pressure and make sure that the delivery was much better. We were quickly getting accolades. The Economic Guide at the time, within 9 months, awarded me a star there. That was quite an accolade in those days. And I was moving swiftly on. But the Savoy Group, the chairman, was then changed because of the way the whole place was performing. The owner died, who was Sir Hugh Watner, who really built the Savoy Group. And he had been there for some 60 years, building the whole empire. And it was his philosophy that really pushed through with the Savoy Group. And because of him dying, his wife sold off the shares. We then were able to actually have a new chairman. So Mr. Shepherd was ousted out and he went down to the Ritz. And lo and behold, I wasn't in the Berkeley very long. I had been there 10 months. Mr. Paharas, who was a great man, he was hotelier of the year. He's one of the finest hoteliers there is on this earth, believe me, a great, great man. And he moved the Savoy Group forward. And he said to me, he telephoned me up in my office one day. He said, well, John, I'm very happy with the way you've been operating, what you've done, because you have to work. You're a manager as a chef, and you have to make these things work within the management structure. And he telephoned me and he said, you're going home. Now, I don't know where you think home is, but mine was certainly Claridge's, because I had my eye. I wanted to be executive chef in one of the very, very finest hotels. And as far as I was concerned, there was only 5 hotels in London that you could do that in at this particular point. And off I went. I did cry on the phone that day. And anybody that knows me, they know I'm a fairly tough kind of guy, but inside there's a heart. I did have a good cry. Off I went back to Claridge's. However, there was a bad morale. I had only been away 19 months and the morale had changed. The people were getting reorganized. They had to work differently. So when I actually arrived, from a brigade of 80, there was some 30, I think it was 38 staff left. So it was a total rebuild program with a new mentality. But I was also very much aware, and I had changed a lot of my style in banqueting, where I had plated everything, which, wasn't a thing that automatically happened in London in the late 80s. And off I went and arrived back in 1994 into Claridge's. And Mr. Paharas said to me, John, everything you've done in the Berkeley, you must do in the Ritz. That meant changing supply, changing the way we operated, modernize the cuisine in the sense that how we were serving. There wasn't so much silver service then, although we did hold on to some of that, and kept on plugging away to refine the cuisine, to modernize, but to keep its classic roots. I employed a chef at the time who was a great young man. He had worked with Marc Verrat, and we worked very closely together. That man is now a 3-star chef called Emmanuel Renaud. He worked with me in Claridge's in the restaurant for a while, for 2 years. And we literally revolutionized the food in the restaurant, but we also changed the banqueting, the whole approach. And I think most people would agree we had the finest banqueting also at that time by far. We were only doing 200. And I got another offer to go to the Ritz. Twice I was offered the job in the Ritz, and both times I had to let Mr. Shepherd down and say, I'm sorry, I'm on a journey in Claridge's. We had beautiful kitchens. I had built up a great team. Things were working well. Then all of a sudden, the Savoy Group was sold. And we got American owners. They wanted something quite startling. They wanted a young chef who they were going to make into a worldwide superstar. And history will show that man became Gordon Ramsay. And rest assured, Gordon Ramsay got a platform like no one had ever had, because he eventually took over every one of the main restaurants within the Savoy Group. He had one in every of the hotel. Now, it was a changing point in my life because I wanted to run my restaurant, and they give me a position of executive chef and director of food and beverage, but that wasn't enough for me, to be perfectly honest. The restaurant, it hurt quite badly, and I thought, right, it's now time to look. And everybody was sort of expecting it, and I was offered to go to the Ritz and have an interview with Mr. Shepherd, and he said to me, his words were, "John, you have the job. I just want you to meet the general manager." Well, I met with the general manager, and for me, I have very strong principles where fine dining, luxury food, luxury service is concerned. And that is, there must be a very, very fine balance with how much profit you take and how much you give to the customer. This balance is very, very important. Now, I never want you to misunderstand that business is business. You have to make a good profit, because the place will never go forward unless you do. So that's number one. Please don't underestimate what I'm saying. However, if you take too much profit, there's two things that happen. The quality of the food will not be sustainable. You will be doing things with that food that are not correct for your customers. And the food cost was very, very low. And the selling price of the food in the Ritz was the highest in London. And for me, I looked at this and I said, this is not right. And I said this at the interview, and the general manager more or less said to me, "You have to make this profits." I said, "Thank you very much, I'm off." Now, this wasn't about me being clever. If I told you the profits that we make in the Ritz now, you'll say, wow, it's probably one of the best in London. But as a percentage, you have to be very careful. It's the percentage that's the problem. You know, value for money, these things all come into it. So I left that day not having the job and went back to work in Claridge's. However, they did send a note to say that I was going to my general manager, who quickly, it was Mr. Christopher Cowby, and he says, "John, I can't believe it, you're leaving." I said, "No." He said, "The Ritz have told me you are." And it wasn't true. However, I got a telephone call 2 days later of Stephen Boxall. I was also being pressurized from my real mentor in life, who was Michel Bourdin, who was the executive chef of the Connaught. And he was also the man that brought the Academy of Culinary Arts to Great Britain, or the Académie Culinaire Française. And he brought that to Britain to set out new standards. He was a very important man. And he said, "John, you're making a mistake. You've got to go to the Ritz." I said, "Michel, I am not making a mistake." And I walked away from the job. Stephen Boxall got in touch with me. I had worked with him in the Berkeley. And he said, "Look, what will it take for you to come and work in the Ritz?" He said, "Because in 1 year's time, I'm going to be general manager." It was a year to the date. He rang me up in Claridge's kitchen, and he says, "Could I see you?" Now, I had been just given the job of the executive chairman of the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts. Stephen had just joined the academy, and I thought it was about the academy. And as I took the telephone call in the kitchen, it was very rushed. And he says, "Can you pop down and see me Monday morning?" I went down on Monday morning, and he said, "So I told you I'll get in touch with you after a year. What will it take for you to come and work in the Ritz?" And I went, "Oh my God." And Stephen said to me, "Come on." And I said, no, listen, it's not about money. It's not about, the building. I absolutely adore the building. I get on very well with you. But there's a couple of principles that are very, very important. I said, your profit margin is way too heavy. And when your profit is so good, what I might add, the profit margin was only good in percentage terms. Money in the bank, it was very poor because they weren't doing any covers. They weren't doing the covers because the food was too expensive and they were trying to take too much profit. So that's what I mean. It's not about being greedy. It's about being correct, and there's a good structure. I explained this to Stephen. He said, well, that's not a problem. He said, we have great owners in the Barclays. They believe in it. And I said, well, that is crucial. We have to relook for value for money. I said, everybody knows the Ritz is overpriced. And he even believed that the Ritz had to be the most expensive. And I said, you can only be the most expensive if you're the best. You're not the best. So with that in his hand, he said to me, oh my God. I said, and by the way, you also need the right number of staff if you're going to grow and build this business. Now, I'll always remember when I first started the Ritz, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, lunch would be about 20 covers. The weekends were, they were good business. They do 90 covers on a Friday night, Saturday night. And, they would get some days where they had it, but nothing consistent. And it was quite low. And I took the job and it became great knowledge. By the time I walked up from from the Ritz to Claridge's, I got a telephone call to say, hey, I've heard you're going to be the chef of the Ritz. That's how quick people got to know. And I hadn't formally accepted the job, but I wanted the job. I loved the look of the hotel. And I said, those are the two things that we've got to change. And we have to move forward. We can't look backwards. I understand the building. I have lived in the Savoy Group for some 20 years now. We have to go very, very specific. Stephen agreed with me and off we went. I arrived in June 2004 and started in the Ritz. And as I said, the first priority was the restaurant for me. The restaurant, it had very, very small numbers. And the whole thing was to restructure the selling prices. My prices, even today, I promise you, is cheaper than 30 years ago when David Nichols was there for the du jour menu. They were £70. I'm £62 now. So that tells you how London has changed with the selling prices. And I reorganized the du jour menu to have a great starting point. The a la carte, we just charged what we needed to charge without going over the top, so that we balanced it out. The Palm Court would do something like 150 covers during the week and 200 on the weekend. This has all changed. The business we do in the Palm Court now is up to 400, 450 per day. The restaurant rose to over an average of 100 covers per day on the evening and 85 for lunch. So it's a very consistent battle, and that's the first thing. And when we actually got there, it's about refinement, making sure that we knew exactly what we're doing, cooking for what we needed, and just operating and making people happy. Food and restaurant service and hospitality is about giving happiness to people in the enjoyment of food and drink, and entertaining them so that they have, a great engagement with the hotel, with the staff, with the restaurant. Without that, doesn't physically work. So all of these things we were very focused on, and the food aspect, it was all about building in there what I know and understand as haute cuisine. And haute cuisine is everything to me. I've always wanted to cook with a lot of truffles, caviar, lobster, Dover sole, turbot. If you look at my menu, that's what you see on the menu. But the fish is basically from around the country. Most of the vegetables, the same thing. Most of the meat, when I say most of the meat, all of the meat, but the poultry still comes from France, I'm afraid, although we do use one or two of the British chickens also. But ducks I get from Brest, chickens I get some from Brest, because I believe they're still the best in the world. And that's what haute cuisine is. You start with the product, you make sure that you're happy in the product, and then it's about good common sense in cooking. You know, adding all kinds of different ingredients, 9 times out of 10 clashes. Great chefs of the world cook quite simply. It's their clever approach to how they serve and how they get it to the customer, what I call the execution of a dish, what it tastes, what it feels like, with everyone using every one of their senses. And if you get ticks from all round, then you know you've got the right kind of dish. But it's all about using all of your senses. One of the things that I forgot to tell you in building the philosophy of the Ritz, there's a picture there, I hope you can see it, where I'm giving an explanation in the Ritz restaurant. After being in the Ritz for 6 weeks, I had a disastrous service. I was very, very upset. I took every single member of the kitchen team up into that restaurant and I said, listen, food writers look at this restaurant. It's one of the finest in the world to look at and feel. Do you think your food is good enough for this room? And that room is the start of my philosophy for the Ritz. It is the stage for everything. Everything must follow. The chef must follow the style. The chef must make sure that the kind of food that is served, it represents that. And the funny thing is, this came to me because I used to see the food critics writing about the Ritz. They used to say, it's too expensive, it's not value for money. And on top of that, the food never matched the room. And when I explained this to the cooks, every one of the youngsters there literally stood back aghast and said, of course, that's what it's all about. So really, that was when it was born in how we would approach the food. And that was very early on. And it's still there to this day. And I tried to explain to everybody, yes, my food is classic. It has to be classic. The room is classic. You know, the tabletop is classic. I hold on to everything classic. However, you must not stay back in the 19th century. It's moving on and really trying to grasp that and enlighten the food. People today cannot eat the same kind of food as they did even 30 years ago. 30 years ago, it was a sauce was a reduction of a stock and wine and a reduction of cream. Can you imagine the calorific value? People just could not stomach that now. So it's about redesigning what I call classic evolutionary cookery. The reason I use that is we learn from history and we move forward, but we never stop evolving and moving forward. We take those dishes and we tweak them so that it fits a modern day service. Even with the ad la table, you know, we set it up so that the waiter has an easier job and he's able to present it in the best possible way, but we hold on to our traditions. So that's what I like to use, classic evolutionary haute cuisine. And the reason I use haute cuisine, I despise this word, fine dining. You hear it all the time. What do you do? Oh, I work in a fine dining restaurant. I work in a fine dining pub. I work in a fine dining cafe. I work in a fine dining hotel. You know, it's rubbish. It's a bad translation. Haute cuisine is about the finest Epicurean food, along with great cooking. And it's also a style of food, you know, the finest types of ingredient. So it's very important that people understand the infrastructure of what we have. And I think it took probably 6 or 7 years before the message started to really come out of the Ritz. It was a long, long process. But now, of course, so many people look and say, wow, it is really something else, because we hold on to a lot of traditional values, but we've freshened them up. And we're going to freshen them up even more. It has to keep going forward. I love the Ritz. I will spend the entire life that I have looking after the Ritz in any way I can, until they actually say, John, time for you to go.
You briefly mentioned about how things have evolved in the last 30 years. Could you just point out something very specific in terms of the food offering which has changed in the last few years? When I say few years, maybe 2-3 decades.
I think a lot of the dishes were richer, heavier, and it was a process that there wasn't enough technique to ensure that the food was keeping the recipe real, but we have to change things to enlighten. And that would be the biggest factor. I still cook my duck liver or goose liver in a very specific way, but the garnishes will have changed, and the freshness of the ingredients that we use alongside will have slightly changed. That's the kind of evolution. But if I take a basic recipe of, let's just say, my langoustine à la nage has been on my menu, I think 30 years. I could show you it from 30 years in Claridge's to what it is today. And it is the lightest possible dish. And the whole focus is to allow you as a customer to taste that langoustine that was brought in alive on the morning. And by the time you've cooked it, just to a perfect point, it's bathed in a very, very light butter nage with lots of aromats and vegetables. And before, it was very, very rich butter, heavy butter sauce. It is so light now, all you can taste is the langoustine with these aromats. So that gives you the kind of feel. It's also looking at sugar content in pastry. Pastry is a thing that I adore to eat. So I give my pastry chef a hard time. He's probably one of the best pastry chefs in London, but we create classic pastry products. We bake and make everything in-house, which is another thing that didn't used to happen. The only thing we do not bake in the Ritz or make in the Ritz is the sliced bread, which is 300 loaves a day. So it's little things, but it's about taking technology, taking equipment, and looking at techniques to refine and enlighten, but keeping true to flavor, because if you lose flavor, it's not good at all. So it's about having a balancing act with the product. But now, especially with my age, because I believe you change in your age with the products of what you look for. Everything I look for now is purity, freshness, elegance with taste, but it has to be all rolled together.
Thank you very much. Now, you mentioned about the history of Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, how you went into it. Would you kindly highlight your role, what you do at the Culinary Arts Academy?
I am now the executive chairman of the Royal Academy of Culinary Arts. It actually affiliates with the Académie Culinaire de France, and that's what it was, the Académie Culinaire. But we took on the patronage some 15 years ago of the Prince of Wales, who heads us up, which we're very fortunate to have. And 10 years ago, the Queen allowed us to be a Royal Academy. And everything that we do within the Academy is with regards to training and developing the next generation of chefs. It is so important. I've been a member over 30 years of the academy. It's an invitation type of thing. Basically, you're doing it's charity work in the sense that, we organize apprenticeship schemes. I might add the apprenticeship scheme is probably one of the strongest things there is. If I tell you my premier sous chef, number 2 man, and the number 3 and the number 4 have been through my Royal Academy apprenticeship scheme. They've been off. One's went off to France and come back, and he was also working for Simon Rogan up north and come back, and he is now heading the main kitchen in the restaurant. The number 2 is another apprentice. So I believe in apprenticeships. I bring apprentices on all the time, and that's part of the culture of the Royal Academy. We also take care of the next step in the line of cookery, and that is an examination. Some people say it's a competition, but truly it is an examination because, we have some 20 winners per year within service, kitchen, and pastry. We have clasped everything together from just being a culinary institution to being a food and beverage institution also. The next stage is the Annual Awards of Excellence. In the Annual Awards of Excellence is for people up to about 27, where they take this examination structure, just like a competition, but as I say, it's live cooking, and you have to cook 2 different meals, and you're awarded the Annual Awards of Excellence. And we also have the supreme winner each year. Then every 4 years, we also have what we call the Master of Culinary Arts. Now, this was actually a variation on the theme. Well, it wasn't even a variation on the theme. It was exactly the same. And it came from France with the Meilleur de France. So it's our equivalent of the Meilleur de France. We call it the Master of Culinary Arts. And it is a very, very tough examination also. But, people that get it, it's a very, very strong thing, but it's a slow process of being able to achieve that. And if we have all of these different tiers in place, hopefully all of to become a member, we look for people that want to build on apprenticeships, who want to train and develop people, and who want to actually make cooking better in Britain. And the 4, there's probably about 9 chefs. There was a club called Club 9. And basically, Michel Bourdin was the instigator, who was chef of the Connaught, and one of the greatest teachers of anyone up until about 2003. And he was nearly 25. He was 25 years in the Connaught, but the Connaught was something spectacular in that time. And it's a blueprint for what I do in the Ritz, to be perfectly honest. And he, alongside the 2 great brothers, Michel Roux, Albert Roux, Richard Shepherd, who ran Langham's, there was Anton Mosiman, Brian Turner, and a few other guys, one of which I worked for, the man called Guy Mouiron, who had the first 2-star Michelin restaurant in London alongside. It was at the same time as the Gavroche got it, but Ma Cuisine moved on. I worked in Ma Cuisine for nothing for 2 years, working 3 lunches a week, but a great restaurant. And these people wanted to improve the quality of food. And you have to remember, prior to that, the French chefs didn't really speak English. They passed it on to their sous chefs, and they passed on to the chef de parties, and the chef de parties used to get the English boys to do things. This is what they changed. And of course, as they trained English chefs, that's where they lifted up. So anybody telling you that the French influence doesn't matter, it was the biggest changer in developing food in this country without any doubt whatsoever.
Thank you very much. You mentioned about examinations, conferring titles in Royal Academy of Culinary Arts. Being conferred the MBE title, it must have been a very huge recognition for you. If you can highlight any particular commitments or responsibilities which comes with that.
First of all, the reason I got the MBE was for services to catering industry. And that was only down to training, developing, and the work that I did within the academy. Now, when you say what responsibilities do you have, I think the only responsibility that I think you should have as an MBE is to be an honest, good, humble person with drive and passion to carry on what you are doing anyway, because that's what you got it for. There was also, because of some of the charitable work, because you're linked with the academy is a charitable organization, and we link up with charities. One of the works that I do, I work with a brain tumor foundation for John King, who was a chef. I'm friendly with his wife, and she has a great charity. And in the last 2 years, they have actually bought 2 microscopes to go into the brain. Each one was £250,000, all earned by this lady who lost her husband because of a brain tumor, who was a great chef also. That kind of thing is very important, but responsibility of what you have to do after is very much about being a good person and an honorable person. And you have to keep that up.
Thank you. I will just move on to a few of the questions which the students are shooting out. With regards to haute cuisine, do you think menus without meat can be haute cuisine? There's a specific example here. Plant-based dishes are in increased demand now, and I see that you have a vegan menu on the Ritz London menu. What advice would you give to chefs who would like to create haute cuisines menus with plant-only ingredients and form plant-based chefs?
I think it's a great question, whoever did that. I talk about evolution and what we eat, how we eat. The chef must always listen to the customer. The customer is the one that drives these situations. Now, if I tell you plant-based food, dietaries, the total number is about 7%. However, we have to listen to that. And can you make it haute cuisine? Of course you can. It's about using the very, very finest ingredients and blending them. And there's nothing, any chef that tries to say, we don't do vegetarian, it's a silly factor, because now the diet and what people eat is driven to the chef. The chef will have to adapt. We adapt. I'm very proud of what we actually serve. I've got one young chap in particular who is out. He has a fiance who is a vegan, and he drives me wild to get things, and he drives a fantastic dishes. We have some brilliant dishes, a salt-baked celeriac with truffle, which is an amazing dish. We've got lots of different dishes with morels, asparagus, depending on the season, the mushrooms. It's very important we stick to seasonal product, and that's how we evolve our vegan plant-based dishes. Everything just moves with the seasons. But rest assured, anything to do with vegetarianism or veganism, we have to be aware. We are serving the client, and the client demand is there. And I think what is very important is to be able to balance what you're serving. And every now and then, I'll have a vegetarian dish that is on the menu, but it's not in the vegetarian menu. So, it is something that will become stronger and stronger with time. I might add, I'm not a vegetarian myself at this moment, because I've gone on a diet and lost a stone in lockdown. It's down to the fact I'm just eating much more vegetables and taking out the carbs, just so you know.
Good. Good tip. what do you see the main differences between cooking at a hotel restaurant versus a freestanding restaurant, and pros and cons of each?
Okay, that's another. I must be honest, I'm liking these questions. I think there's two factors here. When and even Michelin will look at this very, very different. If you come into the Ritz restaurant with the Ritz name, for example, your expectation is totally different, number one, to a high street private entrepreneur restaurateur. Okay? He has not got the furnishings, he hasn't got the building. He's taken a place and he's built his own. So different strengths to some degree. And the private restaurateur is cooking the food he feels he's best at. He is focused on delivering that for his customers and driving his speciality. I think that's a very simplistic way to put it. It means that he is doing the very best that he can. And at times that can be the driving force in culinary change anyway. However, in a hotel restaurant, it is a different concept. First and foremost, you're part of the hotel. You're not the whole part. And you're looking after hotel guests. So the hotel guest will drive what the things are in the restaurant. You will have a percentage of your speciality because that's what you're supposed to do. But you also have to have an infrastructure that fits the hotel. It has to work for the client of the hotel. It has to bring people from outside. So the change in attitude to what goes on the menu is very different. You mentioned vegetarianism, etc., and plant-based. In a hotel, they see that as a must. In a hotel restaurant, it's whether the chef believes in it or the owner believes in it. See it's only a slight change.
Yeah.
And of course, a restaurant chef focuses on his lunch and dinner. A hotel chef, he has something like 5 services a day with breakfast, mid-morning breaks, lunch, afternoon tea, pre-cocktail, dinner, and of course, midnight snacks. So you've got to deal with all of these. So your repertoire has to be so much bigger than an individual restaurateur as well. Now, I really believe it's something that holds or makes things slow happening for the Ritz with the view from people outside. But rest assured, where Michelin is concerned or where customer expectation is concerned, look in the room. You already raised the bar. They're looking for perfection plus. So that's it.
Great. Chef John, there is a lot more questions coming,
Please,
but I'll come back to those at a pace here. But I just want to ask you, you've been talking about quite a few things, what you're talking about, delivering luxury and the expectations and things like this. So now the key element of what you focus is delivering luxury. How do you manage the expectations of the clientele and the hotel in terms of cost, feedback, loyalty, etc.?
Now, all of those things are looked at in a hotel. I think luxury, everybody has a slightly different view in some ways, depending on a style. Now, luxury should be embraced all around in something like the Ritz. That's why I was actually trying to explain a little bit there earlier on. And, whether it's the way people are allowed to sit, what kind of chairs they have, what kind of tabletop they have, what kind of carpet, what kind of lighting, what kind of aroma is in the place, how the service staff are dressed, how clean, how beautiful the furnishings are, how beautiful the crockery is, how fantastic the feeling is, the hospitality. If you don't have great hospitality, it's not luxurious anyway. So these are so important, how we engage with the customer to make sure the customer is engaged back to realize the luxury and to realize what it takes to deliver. And as people in the background, we have to be very much aware of that to make it happen. And for me, it is so important to deliver on every level. And when I go back to the food of haute cuisine, what is it? It's luxury food. And it is lobster, it is langoustine, it is, foie gras, it is the very finest morels, truffle. Truffles are my favorite thing, probably one of the most luxurious things in kitchens, but that's what it's all about. Now, as far as costing and things are concerned, I mentioned earlier on, it's very important to find the balance, especially when you're working with a luxurious product and you have a luxurious outlet.
Okay.
My belief is if you are able to achieve anything between 25% cost and 30% cost, it is absolutely first class, okay, overall. Now, the reason I said that is because in a restaurant, a luxurious restaurant, it's going to be 30% plus, depending, But when you're in a hotel, if you've got everything together and different things, our afternoon tea makes a much better food cost in that sense, but we keep it as one. So we buy all the food in, we sell it in various outlets, and we get a food cost from that. But my situation is, if I told you, I'm not going to tell you because it's wrong. It wasn't when I was there. The food cost was a lot lower, but it is where it needs to be when you're using luxury product, because it proves that I get more customers coming back. And for me, that tells me they know they're getting much better value for money. So it's a fine line, and it's very, very important that everybody must remember, for a business, you have to make money, but be honest with it. Give something to the customer. Be generous. Be helpful. Generosity in restaurants is the key in every sense. It doesn't have to be over the top, but it must feel generous. Mm-hmm. And when you get your costs and your staffing and understand the various levels to make sure that you're operating at the right level and making the right money for your company. And your company and your manager will always discuss what you have to do. What you have to do is say, when I buy this, it costs that. I add this, it costs that. I'm selling it for that. Look at the percentage is a very bad word. Do you know what percentage is? Percentage is nothing but a tool that the accountant can hit you with a stick. I'm going to give you one little display. If you have a percentage food cost of 20% and you have 100 covers and you're getting £70 per head, and I have a food cost of 30%, and I've got many more covers, money to the back pocket and what drops to the bottom line is much more valuable, but the percentage is not better.
Correct. The margins are more important.
Of course, margins and what drops to the bottom line is the crucial element. The percentage is only a way to measure that you have control. Okay? Correct. And I think that's very important.
Great. On a lighter note, I'm just picking up a question here. Rumor has it that Michel Bourdin could have bought the Connaught Hotel twice over what he spent on truffles. Do you keep a record of how much you have spent on truffles in your time at the Ritz?
First of all, I know how much Michel bought truffles. At the end of his career, he was buying 100 kilos of truffle per year.
My goodness.
Okay. Rest assured, it isn't enough to have purchased the Connaught. It's several hundred million.
Kilos is a decent procurement for a hotel.
I tell you now, there's nobody in Britain buying 100 kilos at this moment per season. Okay? I am not going to tell you how many I buy, but I reckon that I probably, along with one other person, buy more truffles than anyone else.
Correct.
That's what I've been told. But it's quite a distance away from 100 kilos plus.
Okay.
And I'm a lot more careful with my truffle, except when they're going onto the, truffle is a thing that you have to be generous with. If you put one or two slices, what's the point?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. That's true. Now, the culinary offerings of the Ritz are very renowned, and you have been conferred a Michelin-starred since 2017 and 4 double rosette. How important is for you and the hotel? If you can talk through the offerings in terms of the outlets. I know you've kind of covered Palm Court and other few outlets. If you can just give a bit of a...
I think the first question I want to ask, the first answer I want to give, when we got the Michelin star, I think for me, it was probably the most important thing in my career. It's certainly alongside the MBE, probably because of the team involvement and the way that my cooks were. It was definitely the most emotional day in my career in working in a kitchen. I think Michelin were very slow because we are not a freestanding restaurant, just looking after a restaurant. And they ask question of whether you're able to maintain consistency. They always talk consistency. And because we are cooking for several outlets, they say, what a beast this is and how many covers you're doing, can you control this? Not that they said to me direct, it was later that they said this to me. And I believe that's the reason why they're slow, because if you're asking me now, I think we're 2-star. We're very, very sharp with how we operate, and we will work hard to push for more, to try and get there. But, we are also now in a situation where we're quite segregated with responsibilities of who does what and where it's done, so that it is actually kept quite separate. Now, if we look at it, we have a restaurant. The restaurant covers might not go back to the numbers that we did in 2019. It's a different kind of situation now. And, we used to do up to 120, 130 on a good night, but average was well over 100. Lunches was averaging 85. And we have that as our fine dining restaurant, and it's so important to get that. And we want to try and get our message out to make sure that people know we are controlling what we're doing. In the Palm Court, we have up to 450. I think when we go back, we will restrain it to about 350, 375 once we've done the refurbishments. So it's still going to be a very busy operation. And because of its style and its profitability, it helps balance everything else out. We have a private dining, which there are 5 rooms currently, although we will actually change that in the new build of what we've got as far as private dining. So, we would have banqueting up to 100 covers a day. It's never been massive in big banquets or anything like that. The biggest room we have is 50 odd. And then, of course, we have room service, we have a bar, all of which have got to be fed along with the staff as well. So all of these things are crucial in their makeup, but it's how we segregate, make people responsible. It's making the kitchen operate in the best way we can. I mean, the Palm Court is a totally separate operation. You have a separate team in every sense of the word. The breakfast and staff cooks are a totally separate team. And there's a big focus towards the restaurant. And then for the private dining, as the private dining orders come, we rota a number of people to operate the private dining. So that's how it operates. But we want more from the Michelin. We want, not that that's the wrong word. The desire is to have more. And, it's because we want to deliver better and better food. And I have total respect for Michelin in every sense of the word. As I say, I certainly cried, and I've got videos of my team and a group of girls locked in the dry store, because that was the only place where there was Wi-Fi to listen when I got it. And every time I look there were 6 girls in there screaming. I'm nearly filling up now. Whenever I actually see that video, I well up again, because it was so emotional. The cooks work so hard for you, and it's theirs. They know where they are, and when you get that, suddenly people say, we've got to do better, and they drive it. Then it's the difference. So I am ultimately very, very proud, but rest assured, we're not finished in the Ritz.
I can see that coming. Chef, I've been to your office a couple of times. I've sat in your office, and it is pretty daunting to be a guest sitting there and seeing the entire operation through the 3 different angles of glass, which you see. It's one of the only kitchens I've seen that kind of precise operation happening around. Now, to manage such an operation, it's quite natural to have precision planning, and it's bound to have operational challenges. How do you balance the brigade and the menu at the same time, especially with the relationship of both internal, external stakeholders? You have a success, which you've been very proud of, and the delivery model, which has been very astounding. I know it's a very vast topic to cover. However, if you can shed some light on the balancing act, what you do.
Number 1, teamwork. I am not John Williams, chef of the Ritz, without my sous chefs. I have incredible young men and women, that actually operate. They take their responsibility very well. They look after things. We talk. They have opportunity for input, because I don't do everything. It's the team. And it's the team that, when you realize you have a team, trust me, things start to work, because there are times every day I go to the kitchen for the service. Every day. I spend a lot of time in my office during the morning and in the afternoon after the lunch service. But I don't come back into the office sometimes until 5 o'clock. I might have gone upstairs and I'll spend an hour in the restaurant. I'll have meetings. So I'm doing all kinds of things. And the next thing, of course, with the team, you have to have structure and responsibility. And people must know the lines of their responsibility within that structure. And then, of course, you can go direct to lift standards, to discuss things, to improve, and to keep on moving so that everybody is doing their level best in producing what we think is the right Ritz food. Does that answer it enough?
Yes,
Yeah.
you kind of and concise in a good way. Now I'll have some few Q&A coming in. Tom is asking, Chef John, is coming up with new ideas as easy as it was 10 years ago? How do you facilitate these new ideas? I know you've touched base on this.
Yeah. Great question. And I think the best way to describe that, over the years, what you tend to do when you're quite young, you're looking for new ideas of new things for yourself. And I think it comes to a point in life when you just say what is good and what is not good. So they're two very distinct situations. And you build one hell of a repertoire of dishes. And what actually happens, and this magic word's going to come back in a minute, is with all of the knowledge that you have behind you, we actually come together as a team, and we develop dishes, but 9 times out of 10, the dish will be an evolution of another dish. Mm-hmm. And that is much easier than to trying to change everything that you do. And that word evolutionary will come back whenever I talk, whenever we are discussing menus, dishes. It is always about, if we evolve that particular dish and maybe changed an ingredient, suddenly you start getting a new dish, and then somebody will come with a slightly different presentation. And, it's not breaking your brains, but it is giving this and I keep using that word, it evolves the cuisine all the time. And that comes from the ingredients also and the seasons, because we know the ingredients we like to do. And every new season that comes in, we will take a dish and evolve it or change the ingredient and bring those things to the forefront. And I believe it's easier when you have that knowledge in the background, because if somebody says something or I taste something, I'm very quick to have that opinion because I feel that I've seen it, done it, and you've got to be, somebody has to really excite you to change. And it is about teamwork. It's not all about me. I think it's very important that we understand that. I have a big team, and there's a lot of people get involved in that.
Thank you. Again, I'm getting so many questions. I'm unable to kind of, pick on one, but I do have quite a few things which is pretty much resonating each other. But let me speak about the charity and the different partnership activities which you have, different TV endorsements and other things what you do. How do you blend it in your regular life of being an executive chef of a luxury hotel? And where do you get the time and how do you manage this? Sorry.
I think first and foremost, what I do for television, I'm not a person that loves doing these things. And I do it as part of my job and expectation of the Ritz. So they have to make that time so that I'm able to do that. I'm not doing it as a private entrepreneur. I am doing it as an employee. So when you see me on television, it is because the hotel thinks that that's a good thing for them to be part of. It's not about me running around saying, please get me on TV, because it has to fit with the Ritz in what we do, and it has to give something back to the Ritz. So that is a vital difference, again, when you're an employee or when you're a restaurateur and a private entrepreneur. This is very, very different. So the balance of time is very, very important indeed. One of the things I struggle with at times is, making sure that I am giving the right time to the various things that I'm active with. And you have to manage your time in a very, very good way. And there are times when I have to say no, because believe it or not, I can quite easily, even now in lockdown, I am tremendously busy. It's a different busy, but I am kept very, very busy in that sense. And if you want to stay in your job, you have to operate as an employee of for example, the Ritz, and you have to be doing the right things for the Ritz. So it's not me driving forward for TV presentations or anything like that. And as far as the academy is concerned, because I've been member of it so many years, and how I operate, the only time I ever really do meetings for the academy would be between 3 and 5 o'clock, so that it doesn't mix
with the service time,
with any of the service times. It's vital that we actually structure things. You have to respect, and the moment that you don't respect your employer, that's it. You'll be out. And that's what a lot of chefs make a mistake of. They think that they're bigger than their, establishment, as it were. And you don't get like that. Silly way. So for me, it's all about the hotel driving that. And I have to, obey to what they actually want. And show that off to the best of my ability. And that's the way I look at it.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, the present situation of COVID is a hotly debated topic and something which we cannot kind of dismiss at all. And there's a lot of questions coming on that particular front. But I'll try to kind of pick on something which is maybe relevant to the times. Evolving food trends. What do you think will be? What do you think you will be seeing in the very near future?
Well, the biggest opportunity that we've seen so far is the delivery service. Now, the only thing that's going to stop the delivery service is having the outlet, because when we go back, of course, you also have a restaurant to run, and people that are using their restaurant kitchen to do delivery service will not have that space. But I'm sure there is a lot of people advertising for kitchens that have been suddenly sprung up, that are built for mobile cooking and sending food out. So I'm sure there are people that will utilize that to some degree. I would not see the one thing I don't believe in is me serving a dish from the Ritz with 25 different bags and telling somebody to reconstruct it. That's number one. I don't think that quite works. There are styles of dishes that do work, but I do see that is a change that some people will grasp onto and move into, but it will never give you the whole restaurant experience. And whilst you might be happy with the food, it will never give you that purity of the dish. As far as how we move forward, we've mentioned plant-based, and I think that has already started to evolve into real food. I think what's happening on the other side in great restaurants at the moment, the food is just getting a little touch finer, and people are understanding more and more how to manage that, and the evolution will just naturally come. But don't think that everything is just going to change. The things that change are the things that are forced because of the situation. The food aspect People may trim menus because they mightn't have the labor, because we're going back into a different environment. And, things change. If you haven't got the staff, you'll have to change something else. So there's all of these questions, and money, of course. Money is going to be very tight. Rental of property, everything is going to change. And we haven't seen the effect of that yet, but it will put a certain pressure for us to evolve again. But my belief is it's coming, you're having a segregation of Asian food, Indian food, European food. There is a slight blend of what modern European food is. Some people will say it's British, some people will say it's French, some people will say it's Italian, but it is merging. What I always actually say as a definition, yes, haute cuisine, but it is British ingredients as far as possible, cooked in the French style, because everything comes from how we cooked with the French chefs and what they taught us. The evolution of that is refinement and just getting more and more knowledge of, the product and what temperature does to food and time. All of these things are very important in how it moves forward. But taste, I don't believe it's going to change much. It's just about lightness, calorific value, and the effect of what that food does to you. I think that is very important, and what the demand will come from that. People will change in some of their diets. That's the big thing.
Thank you, Chef. Now, we've got quite a few students asking in terms of the advice for people who are going to enter the hospitality industry, and bearing in mind some of the student body, there's a lot of career changes. So any advice from your end?
I think, let me tackle the career changes first. I think they can be, 9 times out of 10, they're a little bit older. And when I say a little bit older, it can be anything from 25 to 45. I don't know. But they have an advantage to a young person learning. They have much more learning in their brain already. So my advice to anyone that is changing their career is you have less time to learn, but you will be more than capable of that. And it's very, very important that you move as quick as you can, for the simple reason, the expectation of a person that is 16-year-old with their wage and the expectation of a person that is 25 or 45 are very, very different matters. Mm-hmm. So they have to get to where they are as quickly as possible to earn what I call a fair, decent living for that age group and what their expectation is. So that's one way. The thing that everyone has to do is to, first of all, be humble. They must enjoy hospitality. They should enjoy food. They have to enjoy giving pleasure. And then I would say to them, please, I want you to listen to everyone. Then you have a filter. You decide which one is the right answer, because it is their choice. And you use that and you keep that in your brain and keep moving forward. Because one day, maybe 10 years, maybe 15 years later, you'll come back and you say, I went that route. It was the wrong route. Now I'm going to change back to the other one. But that's what it's all about. It's learning, listening. We learn from mistakes, but go forward. And it's very, very important to work hard. And as I say, to be a good person, humble. One of the things that I do, and I tell my cooks to do all the time, if something has not gone to plan, or something has gone wrong, or something has been exceptionally good, go home, look yourself in the mirror and say, what have I done to be part of this? And what responsibility did I have in what was the outcome? And when you look at yourself in the mirror like that, you'll come back 9 times out. I would say 9.9 times out of 10. If you're courageous, it will be always with the right answer. And, you have to take that forward. But be humble in your approach to teachers, because, you have to be ready to absorb information, work very, very hard, be a giving person, be happy. You have to be happy in a job, because you'll not do any of those things unless you're happy, and make sure it works for you. That's the other factor. But you can always go forward. The big thing is enjoy hospitality. That's what it's all about. There's nothing gives me greater pleasure when somebody says to me, I absolutely adored that piece of fish. I get excited, and it makes me proud. And I think that's what is needed for the feedback for the cooks to make them grow. And I let a lot of my chefs, they have freedom to go into the restaurant, when they've got things, so that they can feel what the customer's all about. So those are very important learning things. And, cooking, you learn in the kitchen. I think that's very important. However, if you don't have the underpinning knowledge from a college and realize that, you will not become a good cook. You need both, and that's vitally important.
Thank you. Thank you for that piece of advice. Now, I'm just going to a final question here. We were supposed to have a 60-minute conversation, but I knew we were going to outrun that, but we have outrun in a grand fashion here, but I don't regret that. Now, I will ask one of the final question here for the students from Chef Colin Westall here. How will a Minister for Hospitality in Parliament help support our industry? And this is something which has been in the news for the last 2-3 months. There was an initiative being done by a few of the businesses to get a representation of hospitality industry in the cabinet. And at the same time, there's another question being asked: what initiative do you think the restaurant or hospitality industry can take to bounce back from the state of affairs that is currently in? If you can probably combine together.
Okay, the first one, the hospitality MP, I think is very, very important. We are certainly underrepresented to the government and trying to actually move things forward with food, from farming to getting food on the plate. And it's quite important that the legislation that we have really moves it in the right direction. There's so many times, even in the academy, we will say we can give an opinion, but we get nothing moving. It's always slow to get things moving. And I think the way that hospitality members are looked at the moment is the perfect example. If you look right through the industry, we probably pay too much rent, that's part of life. But it's about getting a balance in all of these things and making sure, even for the fact of making sure people are paid a fair wage for work that they do. But, with that, you have to have an infrastructure in so that the businesses are making a profit. And that's quite a difficult one. But all of these things are part of how they can help our industry to move forward. Even the work ethic that we have in our industry, people don't listen to tourist information, and we have a lot of information within our industry. We bring in a lot of money, and some of that should come back into actually creating a better lifestyle, a better structure for people to be able to work correctly. Yeah. So I think that would be my immediate answer for that. And the second part was?
Other initiatives which potentially. Yes.
When we come out of this pandemic, I think it's going to be incredibly tough. We're going to get a lot of shocks in the sense that some businesses are going to go and they're being held up by furlough currently. I think we're also going to have a lot of great surprises where some people will get their business up and running, and it's going to be fantastic. But the overall picture is we're going to have to start again. I'm not saying from scratch, but it's pretty way down, and it's how fast we can lift that. But the important factor, of course, is what drives that, and what drives that is the customer. And we need the customers to come out and be willing or able to spend money. If they can do that, then we will get on our track much quicker. But you have to remember, in people's life, going out might be an important thing they feel, but if they can't pay their mortgage or they can't pay their bills, it comes a lot down the process. Right. So it's being able to allow people to operate, and that might mean changing rental values for restaurants. It may, change what value we have. People will have to look at ingredients. People will have to look at their concepts and really decide, is this what I want to do, and will this work? So I think, and the best thing I can say to you is, I think everything is up in the air. It's how we catch, and what we catch is to how we actually move forward, because nobody can give you a 100% answer to that. What I can tell you is I am very, very optimistic. I think the Ritz will be back to full swing within a week or two of opening. I don't see that for everyone. And, we might have some unexpected problems, but, we're in a more fortunate position than most. And for that, I'm very, very grateful. And I just hope that the whole of our industry can get back, because we certainly don't deserve what's happened to us in this, but it is part of life, and it's about, standing up. What is it Sir Tom says? Tomorrow is a better day. And everybody should think on that line and build for a better future, and make sure the next generation are left with something that they can really work on and keep building and making it better than what we had. That's what life is about. It's making the next generation better than what mine is. And that's what your generation will do in the next one. So be positive. I know it's been fairly tough. I live on my own, and, I understand some of those elements. I don't have the hardship that a lot of people have got, but try to be positive and try to build something and look to the future.
That's some wise words from you, Chef. A last final thing on a very light note before we wrap up. Out of curiosity, there's one person asking, what is your favorite cuisine and pastry dish to eat and cook?
Pastry, it's honestly, that's a very, very difficult question. I tell you what I love. The perfect, beautifully caramelized puff pastry. Okay? If you had to say a beautiful millefeuille, it is definitely something there, but it would be a variation on a theme, because I do like very super fine caramelized puff pastry. I love all kinds of desserts. It's such a tough question. You know, I love a souffle. I love tarts. Honestly, there's nothing that I don't like in the pastry. We have it. I tell you what we have, and it's probably one of my favorite desserts over the last 10 years. And it is a chocolate dessert with different chocolate. It's a parfait. Then we have a caramelized tuile with a vanilla ice cream in the tuile. It's sandwiched between a caramelized puff pastry, and we have a very light creme diplomat in between the paste, and then it's built, and then over the top, if you've seen any of the pictures, there is a chocolate cage with holes cut out in an arch sitting on top, and it has a caramel fudge sitting on the side. Let me tell you, when you eat that, and I hope this is not an inappropriate word, but it is orgasmic in the mouth.
I'm sure many of them are salivating by the...
It is one of those desserts.
Chef John Williams, once again, a huge thank you from behalf of Le Cordon Bleu London.
No, thank you. Thanks for listening. All the very best.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Beyond the Plate, Industry Talks by Le Cordon Bleu. Keep up to date with all our news and episodes by following us on social media or by signing up to our newsletter. Links are included in the episode notes. Until next time, à bientôt!